Hello, I'm Dory Knopf. I'm the program coordinator at the Marshfield Public Library. Welcome to our show. Today's author is Lisa Boero. She is a local author, and we will be reviewing and discussing her second book. It's really exciting. The name of her second book is Bombers and Nerdy Girls Do Brunch. We've had a lot of laughs over this.
I'm sure you have. Yeah, it was meant to be funny. So,
and this is her second book that she's actually released in 6 months. Am I correct?
Yeah,
February
in that ballpark, yeah.
to June.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we're really excited to have you today. And we've
you.
all been kind of at the edge of our seats after book one to find out what happens next. So welcome.
Thank you.
So Lisa, tell us how is book two different from the first one? Maybe you can give a little review of what happens in the first one without giving it away.
Right. Well, so the first one introduces the character of Liz Howe. She is a law student. She's in St. Louis, but she's from Marshfield. And she has a condition known as face blindness, which means that she can't tell people apart because of their face. I mean, so she looks at somebody and she sees all of their features, but she doesn't recognize them by the face. So what she does is she uses a bunch of other details to tell people apart. So, you know, how they walk, how they talk, their mannerisms, you know, how their hair looks, any number of things. And at the beginning of the first book, we meet her, and she discovers the body of the managing partner of the firm that she's working at in the stairwell, and gets involved with that murder in part because it becomes very clear to the police that she notices details that other people miss. And so she kind of joins forces with a police officer named James Paparelli, and they end up solving the crime by the end of book one. Of course, you know, the point of these books was not just to have a mystery, but to have sort of a lighthearted mystery. I wanted it to be a fun book to read, and so I wanted to write a book that I would like to read. So of course I had to throw a little bit of, you know, humor, a little bit of romance, a little bit of everything else into this book. So at the end of book one, she improbably has caught the eye of this police detective, James Paparelli, and you know, they're together at the end of book one. So book two starts out with sort of how things move forward in terms of her relationship. She is trying to finish law school and graduate. At the same time, she becomes involved in a bombing in a parking garage in St. Louis, and has to work with James and on her own to try to figure out, you know, who put the bomb there, why was this particular victim selected. There are any number of things that are associated with this. This is probably a more complex mystery in terms of the plot. It has a lot more elements going on. I actually modeled this mystery on the plot of this book on some real events that happened in St. Louis. Okay. So we have a bombing of a person in a parking garage. That's actually based on a real event. We have a politician who may or may not be on the wrong side of the law. That's actually based on a real politician who was kind of an up-and-coming politician in St. Louis. And actually, there were some tangential connections between the politician and this bombing in terms of the real events in St. Louis, and that kind of got me thinking about really putting the two together in a way and creating a mystery out of those two scenarios. And the thing that really set it over the edge is I learned that what the police had, the information the police had about the bomber in this parking garage was a security film, and they had a film of this person walking with a package, which was obviously the bomb, and balloons, and a hat that came down over this man's face. So they had an image of the person, but they did not have an image of the face. And there was a lot of discussion in the St. Louis papers about how difficult it was going to be to make an identification because they didn't have a picture of this person's face. And I, at the time, of course, was thinking to myself, I bet I could figure out who this is.
Perfect.
The face is not required to figure out, to identify
Perfect
who this
scenario.
person is. Right, exactly. So that was sort of, when I read that detail, I was like, all right, I have to do something with this, plot. And that was really, I took some notes, I clipped some articles from the Post-Dispatch, and that was really the impetus for the mystery plot of this second book. So.
And interestingly, when they were describing that there was just this man with a hat and balloons, that's exactly how I visualize it, was through a camera's eye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's what they had. They had security footage. Every parking garage has got some security camera somewhere, and they had security footage. And I remember they actually showed the security footage on on the local television to see if somebody could identify. But they talked about the difficulty of identifying this person because they couldn't see his face, which was obviously the reason why he was carrying the balloons. Why, that was the point, right? Mm-hmm. So they ended up finding the culprit, and as I said, he had a kind of a strange connection. The bombing, I don't think the bombing itself was actually connected in any way, shape, or form with the politician, but he was connected in some way with the campaign of this particular politician. So that was enough for me to say, oh, I'd like to, put something together that ties it together more neatly. So.
Oh, wonderful. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then, there's a couple characters that I see coming, moving over from book 1 into book 2, Vince being one of them.
Right.
But Vince is mysterious to me.
Well, the funny thing about Vince is ironically, I think he's probably the character that I in some ways feel closest to. I feel close to Liz, obviously, because I got her condition, and I sort of think in the way she thinks. But I'm married to somebody who is Latin American, and so I've spent a lot of time. I lived for a period of time in Spain, so I speak Spanish. I've spent a lot of time in the Latin American community, and so Vince is a character that I feel very comfortable with. And in fact, I will say that, and I don't think this is giving anything away, there's a part of the book where Liz goes over to Vince's house, actually a couple different scenes where she goes over to his house and then she goes back for a party. And I will tell you that the house that Vince is in is actually modeled on my parents' house. Because, where it's located and sort of the description of it, and there's a description of the basement, the way it looked. Now, my parents have redone the house since that time, but this, I kind of describe it in a way that this was the way my parents' house looked, when they bought it. And so, as I said, in some ways Vince is sort of closer to me than I think you would otherwise think.
Yeah. Okay, now you're saying that, now I recognize it, but reading I'm thinking, where did Vince come from? Why is there this attraction? Because there seems to be a mutual attraction at times, even though Liz, is formally with James.
Right. No, and as I said, because I've spent so much time in the Latin American community, as a result of my husband, and actually even before that, it was a character that was fairly comfortable for me, in terms of describing. I will also add, and I make a note of this in the acknowledgments at the end of the book. I have a couple of very dear friends, one of whom is Colombian, and so I drew on her experience and her, her recipes and things like that to describe Vince and his family. So I give a shout out to her because she was very influential in helping me kind of develop that world and sort of where he was from, where his family was from, talking about the Colombian food, the food that they prepare. All of that stuff was drawn from experiences that she shared with me and the experiences I've had with her at her house. So.
Well, it was so good, and I'm not just saying this
well, thank you.
To pat you on the back, but it's true. I wanted to make a platter of paella.
Oh, did you?
I was reading your book, and I don't have any ingredients. I have to go out and get ingredients for
Right.
paella. Because I could taste the flavors as you were describing them.
Right. Yeah, and as I said, I went back and did a double check with her to make sure that I had the way I described things, the patacones, the things that I talked about, and I talk about his mother preparing, that's actually how it works. So to the extent that I've been able to do that, that's accurate. Mm-hmm. I did double check it. And the other thing too, actually, now that I think about it, the Vince character came out of an experience. My brother had a very good friend when we were younger, and we lived in Pennsylvania, who was Colombian, and my brother would go over to his friend's house. And I mean, every day he was over there, and he would come back and he would talk about his friend's mom's food, you know, so the empanadas and the things that she would make. And so, you know, sort of back, I had this sort of warm, soft spot, you know, for that kind of thing, like even farther back. And so, you know, when I was developing the Vince character, there were a lot of aspects of that going on too. So.
Yeah, because in the first book, he's sort of, well, he's there and he's attracted to Liz, obviously.
Right.
But this book, he really comes out and you start to get to know him.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to give it away, but
right.
Is he continue through the series?
He does continue, because I love him as a character. You know what I mean? I really enjoy writing about him, and I think he's. I hope this book demonstrates that he's a little bit more complex character than he was in the first book. I would like to say that actually about a number of characters. I think James Paparelli. I mean, he's. You know, I don't want to say he's a cardboard character because I would try to give him as much depth as possible within the confines of the story, but because it is Liz's story. But I want readers to have a sense that he's a more complex character. There's a lot more going on behind him. We get an introduction to his family, which we don't really know that much about from the first book. I spent a lot of time with these books thinking about the backstory on each one of the characters. And I will say this, in terms of mystery readers, I think sometimes readers want to read a mystery just because they want to read the mystery, and they don't necessarily care about the characterization, of the characters. I'm not one of those readers, and I find that to be unsatisfying with certain mystery writers. They do a great job in terms of setting up the mystery. They do a great job in terms of plotting. I mean, there are the books where you read page after page because they've plotted it so well it keeps you going. But by the end of the book, you don't care about any of the characters. I mean, they've been sort of cardboard cutouts, and I didn't want to write that kind of book. I wanted to write a book where you actually care about the characters, and in some ways, the mystery is sort of secondary to the fact that it's all about the interaction of these characters. So to that end, I spent a lot of time thinking about the backstory on each one of these characters, and then slowly kind of revealing that story as it went along. And given the drafts I have of books going forward, I try to continue that. So each book has continuing characters. There may be characters from one book that'll pop up again. We'll skip a book and then pop up again. But there's an arc with certain characters that just continues on, and you get to follow that despite the mystery in some ways. So
and there's some surprising things in book 2. I mean, I see Liz as a sort of a typical college student. She has a sort of simple life and so forth. But then, and I don't want to give anything away, but James spoils her, right, as he should, and he is able to,
right.
But it took me a while to swallow that. For a while I'm thinking, well, she wouldn't want a dress that's $3,000.
Okay, so
but
I got to tell you, that was part. So just so readers know, there are a couple of scenes in the first part of the book where they're preparing to go to one of these society functions, and it's a charitable, sort of dinner dance kind of thing. Okay, and Liz, obviously, as we all know, does not have the clothes for this kind of thing. And in fact, the only good outfit she had was destroyed at the end of book 1 because she was chasing the murder suspect in it, and it got all ripped up. So, so she's got nothing. So James knows this, and so he goes to take her shopping. And what I wanted to do was, all right, I think it is every woman's fantasy, and this is why people like the movie Pretty Woman, right? To go someplace with no limit on the credit card, right?
Yeah.
And to buy this fabulous gown and the jewelry and the da-da-da-da-da. I think that,
carte blanche.
Exactly. I think that is a standard fantasy that people have. What I wanted to do, though, is I thought it would be really fun to put Liz in that situation in particular because, as you say, Liz, because of where she comes from, right? She comes from a fairly modest family that does not prize appearance above other things, right? And the fact that she herself has so many insecurities associated with her own appearance, I wanted to put her in that situation because I felt like, she's not Julia Roberts. She wouldn't just say, "Oh, thank you, isn't this wonderful?" She would have a lot of second thoughts about not just how do I look in this thing, but oh my God, he's spending so much money on me. I don't know that I can handle that kind of obligation to somebody else, And so it was sort of turning the Pretty Woman concept on its head. Like, you know, what do you do with a character who's in the Pretty Woman situation, but who is not motivated by money, is not motivated by looks more than just her own insecurities, and who, you know, and I think the other part of that I thought was fun was, I mean, you have James who's trying to roll out the red carpet, and she's, you know, I mean, it's great, but that's not what motivates her. And
it's very Midwestern too,
isn't
it?
Right. You know, I mean, she's like looking at this going, I could pay my rent with the amount of money that's being spent.
I could buy a new car.
Right, I could buy a new car, right? I could, you know, whatever. You know, and at the same time, she appreciates the you know, the beauty of these things and the way they're constructed and the whole 9 yards. But she's, you know, part of her is going, oh my God, I got student loan debts that are out the wazoo. What am I doing here? You know, so. And also, you know what? We just started dating, and even though I'm absolutely crazy about this guy, I don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I owe somebody for having spent this much money on me.
Absolutely. You know? There's a debt.
There's a debt. There's a, you know, and she's a very independent person. So, you know, I just thought it would be fun because you know.
And it was very fun for me to read through that. What other characters? I mean, are there new characters coming in then? And
right.
I'm only halfway through the book because of my move and everything else that's been going on. I didn't get to finish it yet, so it's kind of fun. But are there new characters coming in second, third book?
Yes. So every book, as I said, has a certain set of characters that kind of continue from book to book, and then have new characters that come in. So in this case, I mean, we continue with the story, you know, with Liz, obviously. We continue with James Paparelli. We continue with Vince. We continue with, you know, Liz's family, her sister Ashley, you know, Holly, James's brother Mark. I mean, we get a continuation of those characters. And then I bring in, well, one's sort of new and one isn't. We get a little bit more backstory on the character who appears once in the first book as the waiter. In the first book, Liz kind of shows sort of what she can do in terms of attention to detail when she goes to lunch with her mentor and boss, and she's served by this guy who's very surly. He's obviously unhappy to be there, and she guesses through a number of things that he's actually a painter and mentions this to him, and they start this conversation about painting. That's the end. You know, that's all you hear about this character, and his name is Matt Crandall. So that's all you hear about him.
Yes.
Right. In the second book, he comes back as a real character. She runs into him again. There's a connection with the mystery that's associated with him. He's a painter. His partner makes jewelry. You come to find out that these characters are more interconnected with the story than you would have assumed having read the first book, and so. Yes, and then they are integral characters in terms of solving the mystery. So you get to get them. As I said, you also have a little bit more on James's family. So you get to meet his mother, his father, you know, his sister. You get a little bit more about James's ex-fiancée, Angelica, who doesn't really live up to that name, and I mean, she doesn't, right? You know, so you get a lot more. You get a lot more of those characters that were secondary characters, or, you know, characters that appear once in the first book. You get a little bit more about those characters, and that will continue. I obviously have a draft of the third book. I'm working on that, so that concept will continue. So each book is continuation of certain characters, new characters thrown in, new mystery. Every book you start a new mystery and you finish the mystery, but then the characters continue on. So,
and as I'm reading through it, I don't know how many other readers felt this way. It almost seemed that every person that Liz encountered would change after knowing her.
Oh,
that she was able to, in her way, touch that person. Certainly the waiter. To me, I thought, well, I'm glad they ran into each other, because didn't she initiate sort of an interest in his work, and then he went back, he returned to painting or continued painting, whatever it was that he did.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's a very interesting observation. I don't think I'd actually thought about it in those terms, but I think you're right. And part of it is, I think what the Liz character does, and I mean, obviously I have her condition, so I don't know that I actually do this in real life, but the character, definitely her perspective is a different perspective. It's very different. And it's different from almost every other character that she runs into. And so I think you're right. I think there is a change element to her interaction with every character because her perspective is so different. As I said, I mean, she's a character who's not, I mean, she's not motivated by money in the way that most people are motivated by it. She's not motivated by appearance in the way that most people are motivated by it. She has a lot of deep-seated anxieties, but at the same time, she's a very strong character. She's bold in a way that I think a lot of people aren't, and so she comes at life very differently. And I think you're probably right. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it that way, but in terms of how I've set the books up, yeah, I think you're probably right.
And she's so brave because, I mean, all of us, to some degree, when I go to a social occasion, I'm nervous.
Right.
Okay, will I remember that person's name?
Right.
Can I strike up an intelligent conversation?
Right. Are they going to think I'm an idiot?
Yeah.
What do we got?
Yeah.
Right.
So here she is, and I don't know how much you described it in this show, but how exactly this condition affects the way you see someone's face.
Oh, right.
Because it was interesting to me.
Yeah, no, let's certainly we should recap that because it's a fundamental part of how these books are structured. Okay, so and I describe it in the way that I perceive it, and I actually used this analogy originally when I was working on the first book, and then that particular scene got taken out because I felt that it was, I said things appropriately in other places, but I kind of describe it this way. All right, so people park their car and they go in shopping and they come out and they're looking for the car in the lot. Okay, so you can see all the other cars in the lot. You can tell what kind of car they are. You can tell, the make, model. You know all sorts of things. You see the cars. But there's only one car that's actually your car. And when you see the car that is actually your car, you have that moment of, aha, this is my car. And it's almost unconscious, right? Your brain is running through all of these different scenarios. Okay, my car's red and this car's white. My car is this and this car is this. I mean, you're kind of running through the scenarios to find your car. Okay, my problem is that I never have that aha moment where I see the car and I know it's my car. So I never have that aha moment where I see somebody and say, I know exactly who that person is. I have to do I have to do all of that looking and comparing between people in terms of other things. So I have to look at somebody and say, okay, this can't be so-and-so because so-and-so is blonde. This can't be so-and-so because so-and-so wears glasses. This can't be, it's that kind of process of elimination. Or in my case, I'm fairly good with voices, so if people talk to me, then I can recognize them. Then I have that aha moment, like, oh, I know who that is.
Okay.
Right? But I don't do it with faces, I do it with other things. So, and I've said this before, and I think it's kind of maybe odd to think about, but it's sometimes easier for me to recognize people when I'm looking at them from behind, because I notice how people stand, I notice the kinds of clothes they wear, I recognize clothes that people wear. So looking at somebody standing in a line, if I'm looking at them from behind, I often have a better chance of figuring out who they are than I do if I see their face. Which is why when I saw the articles in the Post-Dispatch about how the police were having such a hard time identifying this bomber because they couldn't see his face in the video camera, I was like, okay, this is perfect. I have to do something with this.
This is an aha moment,
right? Because I thought, I know a detective who would be able to figure this out. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah.
I know that I've talked to people who have read your book. Either, they had attended your first talk at the library or on their own. And they said, well, what's the difference between that and I have that all the time. I don't recognize people, or I don't remember their name. I remember their face. Right. And I said, well, it's different from that.
It is. In the sense that, some people have trouble remembering names. It is sort of like that in the sense that you kind of struggle and then maybe eventually you get it. And as I said, this is one of those things where I try to describe it as best I can in the book, but in some ways it's very difficult to describe for somebody who doesn't have the condition. So, as I said, it's more that moment of, okay, I know who this person is.
Whereas someone else knows who that person is, they just can't get that name.
They just can't get that name, right. And it's different also in the sense that I think even people who have trouble with names, for the most part, there's a certain circle of people for whom they always remember their name. So, for example, they remember their spouse's name. They remember their children's names. They remember other relatives' names. They may remember their best friend's name. So, it's only once you get beyond that circle that people have trouble with names. When you go into the acquaintance category, and you've met the person a couple of times and you can't remember. I mean, that's where it is. I have the issue I have with everybody. So it includes...
That clarifies a
right,
lot.
so it includes my husband, it includes my kids, it includes my parents. I mean, people I've known my entire life, It includes them. So I have that moment of, okay, yes, this is so-and-so, with people who I should not have that with.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah.
How much do you have to know somebody in your sense before you actually recognize them, and it doesn't matter?
Well, and it doesn't matter. Obviously, with some people, I mean, with my kids, there's so many things about them that I will normally recognize that it's easier because I just have more, I have more data points to pull from to try to figure out who this child is. But I will say, I mean, it does make it hard to identify people you should know in photographs. It makes it very hard to identify yourself in photographs. I actually have, this is going to sound very strange, I have this same phenomenon when I look at myself in the mirror. I have this moment of, particularly if I'm a little groggy, I'll have this moment of, is that me? No, that's not me. Yeah, oh yeah, that is me.
And then you kind of talk yourself.
And then I'm kind of like, oh yeah, this is stupid. I'm staring at a mirror. This has to be me, right?
Or somebody's playing a really bad joke.
Right, there's no other option here. This has to
Unless
be
it's
me.
Carol Burnett or,
right.
Lucy.
I mean, but I do sometimes think to myself, if somebody switched out, put in one of the two-way mirrors as opposed to a regular mirror, I might be fooled for a second or two, because,
more of the same clothes, right?
Yeah. I mean, I really might be fooled. And so it makes it sometimes hard for me to recognize myself in photographs. I will look at the photograph, and if there's another, if there's another blonde woman who's about the same height, it'll take me a moment, and then I'll be like, wait a second, I don't own that outfit. That can't be me. That can't be me. Yeah. I have to be this person over here.
So now you said overall there are how many books?
Well, so I have 2 finished books, and then I have drafts of another 4. So obviously the book that I have in the best shape at this point, the next book that I have the best in shape is the 3rd book. So I'm working on that draft. I have another series that I had started, and I have the first book in that series to a very good point. So the next book that will come out will not be a Liz book. It will be a book in this other series, and then I hope to get the 3rd Liz book out after that.
Oh, okay. This other book is also a mystery.
This other book is also a mystery. It's called Hell Made Easy. It's a very different book. So the premise of this book is that that there is a law student who sold his soul to the devil for the love of this woman, and they date for a period of time, and then she leaves him for another woman. And the devil comes back to him and says, I know that you want to get your soul back. If you come work for me for a period of time, you can get your soul back. So he signs a second contract with the devil to work as the devil's minion. But he's unhappy, obviously, with that job. And the devil, of course, the devil's in the details. So, of course, the period of time he thinks he's supposed to work for the devil gets elongated, and then he decides that he's got to break himself free. He finds out that the devil has a number of these minions, and because he has to run, his evil empire requires funding, so he has to have some legitimate businesses that he maintains on the side. One of these legitimate businesses is a giant law firm, and he has a head lawyer who is the lawyer for all of his contracts. And this lawyer dies in mysterious circumstances. And so when the character, this law student who's named Brandon, when Brandon figures out that this attorney has died and under circumstances that are a little mysterious, he decides he's going to figure out what happened, and then he's going to use that information to blackmail the devil and get himself out of that contract.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a story that works in multiple threads. So one thread is Brandon trying to free himself from this contract that he has signed. One thread is the devil and what the heck he is doing, because of course maintaining an evil empire with a bunch of devils who all want his job and incompetent workers at every single level is extremely difficult. And so the devil has a heck of a time keeping everything afloat. And the death of this particular attorney has thrown a monkey wrench into his processes. So you have the storyline of the devil trying to figure out what to do with his empire as it slowly collapses under him. And then the third line of story has to do with a young reporter who lives in a small Wisconsin town. The town's made up, by the way, because I figured I couldn't name a real town and then talk about the devil. That would be very good.
No,
so,
people would be storming in.
Exactly.
Fire.
So
Yeah.
small Wisconsin town, a fictional town. But she went to journalism school, and then the only job she could get was at the local paper. And so she's back home. She's living with her mother. She thinks her life is going absolutely nowhere. That it's boring as all get out. She doesn't like what she's doing. She wants to be a journalist. She doesn't want to write stories about lost pets. Which is what she's doing. So her life changes when she is actually the niece of the attorney who dies, who is the catalyst for the story. And so he gives her an inheritance that brings her into this problem of what happened, how did he die, and so she is thrust into the role of trying to figure out what happened, and then also trying to thwart the devil at his own game. So
interesting. So the people in the story have this sort of demonic belief.
Well, it's almost like I make the devil very I don't want to say down to earth, but practical in a way. So it's almost like you take that concept of the devil and you make the devil a real person in that sense, with real problems and real issues, and that's sort of the fabula of this story, is that the devil is real and he's living in the U.S. and he's living in a compound in New Jersey, and he has a real empire of businesses that he's trying to maintain with lazy staff who are constantly trying to backstab him. That's sort of the idea behind this.
So it sounds like corporate America.
Yeah, right. So it's the devil running corporate America, pretty much. Yeah. No, the idea being, I've always loved these stories, about the devil, where the devil and Daniel Webster. These stories about people who outsmart the devil. I've always loved these stories, and so I thought it would be fun to kind of write one of these. And obviously, as a lawyer, I know a lot about contracts. I know a lot about that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to throw that all in. I wanted to, the tone of the book, as you could probably tell, is humorous. It's not a serious book in that sense. I'm a big fan of Douglas Adams, the British writer who did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I love his books, and I wanted to have that kind of book, but about this particular subject. So it's humorous. It has a lot of characters bumbling around, and then a mystery and then a resolution. So, but it is actually the third book. There are 3 books, supposed to be 3 books in this series. So this is actually the first book. So there will be 2 more books. I have them plotted out and parts of them written, and so
of the second series.
Of this second series.
Yeah,
right?
the non-Liz series.
The non-Liz series, right?
So you call it the Liz, and then
I call it
Devil
I call it the Hell trilogy, because it's Hell Made Easy is the first, and I should explain the title. So one of the things about this book is that this character Brandon, the devil has a home office, and Brandon kind of befriends the guy who runs the home office, who is kind of a slacker sort of guy, and he has a copy of a guidebook for minions that the devil put out in the 1950s. And
it published it, and it's called Hell Made Easy, and it's like a Dale Carnegie style book for how to be evil. Right? and influence people.
Exactly, to do wrong, right? And so so part of the fun of this book is that Brandon is working through this book at the same time that the plot is going on. So you get excerpts of this book in between chapters about, what else is going on. And I have to say that was probably the most fun thing to write, were these, how would if the devil were Dale Carnegie, how would he tell you how to be successful at being evil, right? Like, what would be the
right?
What would he tell you? What would be the advice for you to follow? And so I tried, that was funny to try to imagine and to write. So
well, I guess part of it would be coming to someone's house. What I remember from Dale Carnegie was, and talk about what they like.
Right.
What's important to them.
What's important to them, right? So, but think about what if you were trying to do that to get somebody to sign a contract with the devil? Like, I mean, what that advice would look like, This is what you need to do in order to get this, and then so it. And of course, the book has a bunch of very funny chapters about what you're supposed to do in different situations, and so the thought being that Brandon decides he's going to read this book and follow the dictates to see if he can do the reverse. I mean, one up the devil at his own game, which is his whole goal because he wants to get out of this contract. So
fascinating, interesting.
Yeah. So
I can't wait.
I mean, it's as I said, it's a very different book. It has the same, I would say, it has the same kind of snarky humor, because apparently that's the only thing I can write is kind of snarky humor. But it's a different book in the sense that it follows different storylines. It's from different characters' perspective, and it has a story that involves fantasy, in that
I was going to say fantasy, because unlike the Liz series, it's taken from some of your personal experiences,
right.
And as well as media. Things that happen in the news. Well, the second book seems a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
Fantasy. I mean,
fantasy.
It's
fantasy.
Like
Mystery.
Right. And I mean, it's not like I developed this out of thin air. I mean, as I said, there are many, 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 many stories going back to the Middle Ages about the devil in person coming and doing things, and then the devil is the trickster sort of a character. So I mean, it's got a very long history. This kind of book has got a long history. But I will say it's a lot like it's fantasy in the sense that Twilight is fantasy, where you take fantastical characters and plop them in as if they were part of real life.
Yes.
And that's kind of the concept with this book, is that the devil is actually real, and he's got real problems, and then he's got a bunch of people, including the characters you're supposed to root for, who are trying to do him in, and take over.
Throw him over the cliff.
Throw him over the cliff. Right.
So in the home office of
right,
the devil,
right.
Do the elevators go down?
No, they
okay.
don't. They don't often, but they don't. But I figured, since this was the other thing I did, was I took a look at the 7 deadly sins, and I kind of walked through them, figured out which ones the devil would be most put the most emphasis on, and one of them, of course, is avarice, right? So the devil is going to be extremely cheap, because why would the devil spend money? I mean, avarice is okay. So I had this idea that the devil's offices are all stocked with 1950s and 60s era machinery. So in order to do memos to the file, which they have to run them on the ditto machines, the old ditto machines with the blue and the weird smell, that
aroma,
right, exactly. So so it's not only that he has inefficient workers who are not motivated to do a good job for him. He's also got machinery that is extremely outdated, but he's too cheap to buy anything better.
So there's no email.
No email with the devil. No email. They're at there may be a fax machine, maybe, but yeah, most of these memos are run on the mimeograph machine or the ditto machine. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny. So where is your ultimate goal? What is your ultimate goal? To write, many series books and become an author full time, or would you ever give up your practice, or no?
That would be great, in the sense that I love to write and I love working on this stuff, and so it would be great to do that more. I will say that I do, and I had an article in Wisconsin Lawyer talking about talking about how having a practice as a lawyer and then writing on the side, and kind of the interaction between the two. I'm a lawyer in-house. I work for Security Health Plan, so my job is I don't have clients per se other than the company, and I, as much as I love writing and I would love to do it full time just because I love it, I do think there is value on both ends to having both things going on. On the one hand, I mean, I think my creative writing really does help in terms of my ability to write legal papers. I spend a lot of time writing. I'm reviewing contracts. I spend a lot of time writing letters. I spend a lot of time doing that kind of drafting, and I think having a creative outlet is very helpful for that. On the flip side, I think having being in the world, so to speak. I mean, being in a job with other people and dealing with other people's problems, which is what lawyers do, I think gives me sort of a grounding, right?
Sure.
In what interests people and what they would be interested in reading, and then just funny things that happen that I think, I think to myself, okay, I got to remember that because I'll use that at some point in time,
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure you made plenty of characters, situations.
So I mean, I think it helps to have that kind of grounding in the real world too. I think it helps my writing. So.
And you said now during the process of writing, editing, and so forth, you rely somewhat on your mother, who's also a writer.
Yes. So my mother is a writer, and my mother, I think we talked about last time, my process with an agent, and then the Amazon contest and how the first book came out. My mother has had very similar luck, unfortunately for her, with agents, and so she has a number of books that she's written. Unfortunately for her, a lot of her publishing, the stuff that she's got published is either educational publishing, and she's got some short stories and things like that, but no novels. So, however, because she writes her own novels and has for the last over 20 years, she is an extremely good editor. And because she's my mom, she is a very good editor for me because she's not only supportive of my work, she gets it. And she gets it in a way that I think somebody outside of my family may not. And she is probably, I get a lot of great feedback from all sorts of people. But she really, and just in terms of her overall look at each book and her advice about how to structure things and all of that. She is my main editor in that sense.
And she's not afraid to.
She is not afraid
approach
to
you
tell
and say,
me
look.
exactly. And actually, this book, I was thinking that I would get this book out even sooner. I would get it out in the December, January, February timeframe. The reason it came out just recently is because she'd read a version of this book, but had not read a more recent version. And when she reread it, she called me up and she said, "Look, I've made some edits. I think you need to do some things with the beginning of the book. And, this is not what you want to hear because you want to hear everything's great, honey. It sounds great. I think you ought to move forward with it." That's what I wanted to hear. I did not hear that. I heard, "I think you need to do some things with the beginning of the book because I think it needs to move faster and I think it needs to set this thing up and this other thing up and it doesn't quite do it." So, with my mom, she's so good at this stuff and has been so good for the first book that I, even though I didn't really want to hear it, I heard it and thought, okay, no, she's the
reader.
She's the reader, and she is completely right, and I do need to do what she's suggesting that I do. So I went back to the drawing board, did a very large edit that did some structural things to the beginning of the book, kind of got it on a different footing, and then this is the version of the book that came out. So
now, do you storyboard it, or
I do.
How do you put all those pieces together?
You know what? I have kind of a strange process. It's probably not particularly efficient. With the Liz books, I will have a sense of kind of generally theme-wise, kind of what I'm going for. I will have a sense generally about what sort of mystery I want to do and what I think the mystery needs to involve. I'll know where I need to start, and I'll know where I need to end. I'll have in my head of the ending scenes and then the wrap up. I'll have a sense of that. And then I'll just kind of start writing, and I will get about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the book, and I'll hit this wall where I will just think to myself, I have no idea how I'm going to tie up all of these loose ends and get to the point, the ending point that I know I need to get to. And then I will sit down and on a piece of paper kind of plot out and sort of storyboard kind of, all right, I've got this character doing this, and then this is what needs to happen, and then, and I will plot out the rest of the mystery so that I've got everything tied up the way it needs to be tied up. And I've done that with the Liz books. The How Made Easy books were a little bit different in the sense that because I've got 3 different stories working at the same time, you need to do a lot more pre-planning with that kind of thing. So I would do a lot more outlining kind of as I went along to get a sense of what the next story, what the next chapter needed to be, because the points of view alternate very, based on the chapter. So that was a little bit more structured, but not a whole lot. I mean, it was kind of me with some little notes and an outline, and then kind of thinking, okay, well, this goes here and that goes here, and then it's just edit right?
To the 10th. Yeah.
Go back through that thing, make sure you have not dropped any, that there aren't things that are hanging out there that need to be resolved, that there aren't facts that don't fit what you're doing, that the reader can actually follow your train of thought. I got to the end of this book, and as I said, it's a more complicated mystery. There are a bunch of other moving parts. There are a bunch of other aspects to the mystery. And so I had this wrap up at the end, and my mom said to me, she said, I think I understand it, but I'm not sure I do. And I thought, okay, that's not good. So then I had to go back and kind of, okay, so I'm going to say all of this stuff, and then I'm going to sum it up, because there are a lot of moving parts here, and I think that readers may need more explanation as to, how did Liz get here? How did she, what were the facts that led her to think this? So I had to go back and do a lot more explaining at the in the reveal chapter, right?
Do you have other readers besides your mom?
I do. I mean, I have a
technical readers.
I have a writing group, and they've been very good about reading my work and giving me feedback, and actually a funny story related to Hell Made Easy. All right, so I did a draft of this book, and because it was a different book, and because I really loved these devil stories and thought this would be a fun thing to write about, I wrote this book in probably 2 months. I mean, somewhere in that ballpark, 2.5. And I got it done, and I was all excited, and I sent it to my writing group. And I just remember we had this meeting, and I'm walking into the meeting thinking, they're going to love it, it's great, da da da. And they, to a person, so there are 3 other people in this group with me, there was only one of them who liked the main character at all. The other 2 hated him. I mean, hated him. And they're like, well, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to And I remember just kind of scribbling on a napkin, okay, let me just get this down. And I walked away from that meeting, and I was just thought, oh my God, this book is a disaster. This is horrible. But after about 20 minutes, I kind of, was able to sort of synthesize what they had been telling me. And, they were right. And I need to go back and do this stuff. And all right, they hated the main character. Why did you hate the main character? I had a laundry list of things that they hated about the main character. So I was like, okay, I gotta do something with Brandon, because clearly he's the problem. So
Brandon is the main character.
Brandon is the main character.
And he's supposed to be this kind of good guy, but can be pushed into the
his problem,
dark side.
Right. Well, his problem is he signed up with the devil, and then he's not very good at being evil.
Right.
That's his problem, is that he's just not very good at it. And at the beginning, it's not really because he's got such a great moral center. It's just because he's incompetent. You know what I mean? He's just not very good at it. So he develops a moral center and rights the ship, and defeats the devil at his own game, and does a bunch of other good things by the end of the book. But he starts out as that kind of, and I hate to say this, but I had a conversation with my mom the other day. We were talking about this book because I'm working to get it, in good shape so that I can get it out. And we were talking about how, she said this to me. She said, boy, I've known, when I was young, I knew a million guys like this. Guys who were just kind of, they were somewhere, they were always kind of in the middle. They weren't passionate about anything. They weren't driven about anything. They were just kind of there, and they didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives, and that not knowing what to do with their lives influenced everything else about them.
Oh, sure.
And it was almost like they couldn't realize their full potential because they didn't know in what direction to go with it.
So they're kind of waiting for that.
So they're waiting for somebody to tell them what direction to channel their energies, you know.
And on comes this evil.
Right, well, exactly. So the idea being that he's taken a significant wrong turn, and now has
but
to
it was a turn.
It was a turn. Something happened. He could say, give me a wrong turn, and now has to, get himself back on ship. And and obviously there's interaction with the Mary Alice character who, wants her life to be exciting, and then gets way more excitement than, she ever thought she would, and sort of her coming to terms with what does she want? What is, again, she's somebody else who's, in a job she's not terribly keen on, and, it's not what she wants, but it's the best thing she can come up with at the time, and doesn't kind of know what to do from that point. So,
well, and that's more realistic than, well, some of the, how do I say this, the more antiquated stories that, boy sees girl, boy wants girl, boy gets girl,
right,
white picket fence. I mean,
right.
And this is the kind of reading I think a lot of people are looking for.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, as I said, this is kind of a different book. I'd actually sent this book, it was in fairly good shape. I'd sent it to my agent, and he just didn't get it. He didn't understand it, and he just didn't get it. And so, I think it's a book that is, Liz is a book where you could actually target the audience, right? I mean, women in general, maybe there's an age range, although I've been very happy
students,
that, right, I mean, but I've been happy that the age range with Liz is quite a lot larger than I thought it would be. I mean, I've had women, elderly women tell me they like the book. I've had teenagers tell me they like the book, so that's been good. But at least, you have that sense, okay, it's kind of targeted towards women. There's a readership out there for these kinds of books. I think the problem my agent had with it was that he couldn't really put Hell Made Easy in a particular category. So my hope is, I get it out there and it creates its own category. You know what I mean? It finds its own readership, because at this point I'm at a point where I feel like it's in good shape, and I'm happy about it, and so I want to get it out. I want to have people read it and tell me what they think.
And I know as a reader myself, I had never really walked down the fantasy genre road.
Right.
But I am trying new things,
right.
like wine and food.
Right.
I decided to try new one. And this, to me, and this is only my
right.
perspective, but I see the mystery part being attractive to me, and that fantasy dash, demonic,
right? Yeah, I mean,
creepy,
right? Right.
story kind of thing. So
right. So well, but as I said, my agent didn't really know what category to put this book in, and he actually said that to me. He said, "Tell me what genre this book is," and I said, "Well, it's its own genre." And he's like, "That's not the answer I need for you." So
so what is it?
I would say, I mean, I as I said, I liken it to Douglas Adams, who sort of created his own genre of comedy, sci-fi. In this case, I think this is the book Douglas Adams would have written if he'd been interested in lawyers and devils and and the funny things that happen when people try to do evil. I mean, I think that's sort of where this book sits. So we'll see.
So this is Dory Knopf with the Meet the Author series, talking with Lisa Boero. With her second book, Bombers and Nerdy Girls Do Brunch. This is second of six, possibly six in the series of Liz Howe and her adventures into murder and mayhem.
Right.
So thank you for coming, Lisa.
Thank
and
you.
Stay tuned. She'll be releasing probably another book fairly soon. And keep reading out there and enjoying the murder mysteries. And we'll see you next time on Meet the Author.